By the time Evan Cole sat in federal court, nobody was calling him the boy who used to sleep behind Rosa Alvarez's laundromat anymore. They called him something else: a fraud, a thief in the language of mercy, a man who had learned how to make desperate people believe that help always came with his hand on the door. Behind the prosecutor sat the people who once thought Evan understood them. Men who had slept under loading docks, women who carried their lives in plastic bags. Claire Benton, the volunteer whose name had been dragged through reports she never wrote. Malik Reed, 19, staring at the floor like he was still trying to disappear. And Rosa Alvarez, hands folded over a cane, no longer the owner of the laundromat where Evan had been given a warm place to sit. Rosa did not look at him once, not when his name was read, not when the prosecutor said the laundromat was gone, not even when Evan turned toward the bench with the face of a man who still knew how to look wounded. The government said Evan's homeless outreach program had stolen more than money. It had used names, signatures, shelter beds, and food vouchers as things to trade, withhold, or control. Help became leverage, and the people who came to Evan because they had nowhere else to go learned that his door opened only for those who stayed useful. By the end, Rosa had lost the business she spent 40 years building. Malik had been pulled into charges meant for someone with more power. Claire spent months proving she was not part of a lie built around her kindness. Evan had built a door with the word help painted across it. Then he decided who was allowed to pass through. And that was what made the story so hard to look at. Because long before Evan Cole learned how to turn suffering into a business model, he had been the child curled against the back wall of a laundromat while dryers shook the floor. He had been 8 years old with a paper cup of vending machine soup, waiting for a mother who said she would come back before morning. There was a time when all Evan wanted was for one adult to open a door and mean it. So how did that boy become the man who held the keys? The judge did not raise her voice when she spoke Evan Cole's name. That made it worse. There was no anger in the courtroom, no shouting, no dramatic sound except the quiet shuffle of papers. The room was cold in the way government rooms often are, built to make every human feeling seem smaller than the file in front of it. Evan sat beside his attorney with his hands folded on the table. He had learned long ago how to look still when people were watching. The charges sounded clean when the clerk read them aloud. Wire fraud, misuse of federal housing funds, false statements, obstruction, exploitation of vulnerable adults. Each phrase landed neatly, almost bloodless. But behind those words were people who had once lined up outside a church basement before sunrise because Evan's program promised showers, socks, bus passes, and a chance to be treated like citizens again. Behind those words was Malik Reed, who had believed Evan was proof that a person could crawl out of the cold and still keep his soul. Behind those words was Claire Benton, who trusted the sadness in Evan's voice because she thought sadness made a person honest. And behind those words was Rosa Alvarez, who had opened the back door of a laundromat for a boy the rest of Dayton had learned not to see. The prosecutor called Evan's crimes calculated. The judge called them predatory. A newspaper would later call him a man who weaponized compassion. Evan heard all of it, but as the courtroom blurred around him, what came back first was not the outreach office or the grant forms. What came back first was the sound of dryers, a low, shaking thunder under a thin floor. He was 8 years old again, sitting against the back wall of Alvarez Wash and Fold on a winter night in Dayton, Ohio. The lights were too bright. The air smelled like bleach, wet denim, cheap soap, and burnt dust inside old machines. Outside the glass door, the parking lot shone with dirty ice. Evan had a paper cup of soup warming both hands. His mother, Dana Cole, had told him she would be back before morning. She had said it softly, which Evan had already learned was worse than saying it mean. When adults spoke softly, it usually meant they wanted the cruel part to sound gentle. Dana had kissed the top of his head, checked the parking lot twice, and told him not to open the door for anyone but her. Then she left. She had reasons. Evan would understand that later. Some were real. She worked nights when she could find work. She owed money to people who did not knock politely. The apartment had a man inside it named Roy Calhoun, and on the nights Roy drank, the room seemed to shrink until breathing felt too loud. Dana was not a monster. That was part of what made the wound so confusing. She could love Evan in the morning, brush lint from his shirt, promise pancakes when her check came in, and still leave him behind a laundromat before midnight because fear had become stronger than love. Evan was too young to name that. He only knew that love, in his life, kept walking away with keys in its hand. Rosa found him the first time because he sneezed. She came from behind the counter with a ring of quarters in one hand and a towel over her shoulder. She was not soft in the way storybooks made old women soft. Her shoes squeaked. Her voice was rough from years of speaking over machines. She looked at Evan, then at the cup of soup, then at the back door Dana had used. "You waiting on somebody, kid?" Evan nodded. He did not tell her his mother had been gone for hours. He did not tell her the apartment scared him more than the cold. Children learn early which truths make adults nervous. Rosa did not push. She brought him another cup of soup and laid a blue coat over his knees. "Stay where I can see you," she said. For most children, that might have sounded like an order. To Evan, it sounded almost like being kept. That was the first dangerous mercy of his life. Not grand enough to save him, but warm enough to make him need it. After that, the fear of hearing the door close became something he carried forever. After that winter, Alvarez Wash and Fold became the place Dana Cole used when the rest of her life got too loud. She never said it that way. She said she had an extra shift, or Roy was in one of his moods, or she needed Evan to be brave for a few hours. But children do not need adult words to understand adult fear. They read it in hands. Dana's hands shook when she locked the apartment door. They moved too quickly when she counted crumpled bills from her apron pocket. They hovered over Evan's shoulder in the laundromat parking lot like she wanted to hold him and run from him at the same time. "Just till morning," she would say. Sometimes morning came. Sometimes it came late. Sometimes Rosa Alvarez would look at the clock, then at Evan, and say nothing at all. Rosa was not the kind of woman who made charity sound beautiful. She owned 3 cardigans, 2 good coats, and a temper that could scare drunk men out of the doorway. Her laundromat sat between a closed appliance store and a check-cashing place. Half the dryers rattled like they were full of loose bolts, but the floors were swept, the coffee was hot, and Rosa knew shame when she saw it. That was why she never asked Evan too many questions. She gave him small jobs instead. Empty the lint trays, stack the plastic baskets, wipe the folding tables after the night rush. If he did them well, she gave him quarters for the vending machine and pretended it was payment instead of pity. Evan liked that. Payment meant he had earned something. Pity meant someone could take it back. For a while, he built his life out of those small mercies. The blue coat Rosa kept behind the counter. The chair near the third dryer that blew the warmest air. The radio she played low after midnight, old Spanish songs Evan came to associate with safety. The folded towel she placed beside him when he fell asleep, so his face did not rest on the metal chair. Then Dana would return. She always looked smaller in the morning. Her makeup smudged, her hair smelling like cigarettes and fryer grease, her smile too bright, as if brightness could cover the fact that she had left her son under fluorescent lights again. She would thank Rosa quickly, promise it would not happen much longer, and guide Evan toward the door before anyone could say what everyone knew. Evan looked back every time. Rosa did not follow. That was the part he remembered most. Not because Rosa did not care. She did. In practical, stubborn ways. But she could not keep him. She was not family. She was not a foster parent. She did not have papers, signatures, court approval, or a spare bedroom a social worker had inspected. She had soup, towels, a blue coat, and a door she could open only for a few hours at a time. To a child, that difference was impossible to understand. To Evan, it felt like another kind of leaving. The first time Child Protective Services came to Dana's apartment, Evan was 9. A neighbor had called after hearing Roy shouting through the walls. The apartment looked worse in daylight than it did at night. Plates in the sink, a cracked mirror, a hole near the bedroom door where something heavy had hit plaster. Dana kept telling the caseworker everything was fine, just hard right now, just temporary. The caseworker asked Evan whether he felt safe at home. He looked at Dana. He thought about Roy's boots in the hallway. He thought about the laundromat chair. He thought about Rosa saying, "Stay where I can see you." He thought about what might happen to his mother if he told the truth too clearly. So he said, "I'm okay." It was the first lie he told to protect someone who had not protected him. Nothing changed after that. Or maybe something did. Dana became careful for a few weeks. Roy disappeared, then returned with flowers and a new apology. The notices on the door kept coming. The rent stayed late. The nights behind the laundromat continued, but now Evan understood there were people whose job was to ask questions, write answers, and leave. That understanding hardened something in him. The world had doors everywhere: apartment doors, office doors, car doors, court doors, but none of them opened just because a child needed them to. The winter, Evan turned 11. Dana vanished for 2 days. Rosa called every number Dana had ever given her. Most were disconnected. One belonged to a diner where Dana no longer worked. Another belonged to a woman who said she did not want trouble. Evan sat behind the counter with the blue coat around his shoulders and watched Rosa's face change with each call. By the second night, Rosa did what she had avoided doing for years. She called for help. Evan did not forgive her for it. A police officer came first, then a woman from child services. They were not cruel. That almost made it worse. Cruelty would have given Evan something clean to hate. Instead, they spoke gently. They asked where his mother was. They asked whether he had relatives. They asked Rosa questions too, questions that made her voice turn sharp. "He can stay here tonight," Rosa said. The caseworker shook her head. "For tonight, maybe, but not officially. We need placement." Placement. Not home, not safety. Placement, Rosa argued. She said Evan knew her. She said he was calm here. She said she could put a cot in the back office. But forms did not move as fast as a county vehicle waiting outside with its heater running. Evan stood near the dryers while adults discussed him as if he were a package delivered to the wrong address. When the caseworker touched his shoulder, he pulled away. Rosa crouched in front of him. She put both hands on his sleeves. "I'm going to find out where they take you," she said. "You hear me? I'm not disappearing." Evan wanted to believe her. That was what hurt, because believing meant giving the world one more chance to prove him wrong. They walked him out through the front door, past the folding tables, past the humming machines, past the blue plastic baskets stacked in a crooked tower. Outside, the county car waited near a mound of dirty snow. Evan turned around. Through the glass, Rosa stood under the flickering sign, one palm pressed flat against the door. She looked trapped inside the place that had saved him. The car pulled away before she disappeared from view. Years later, Evan would remember that moment incorrectly on purpose. He would tell himself Rosa had let him go, that she had opened the door but not fought hard enough to keep him, that every adult, even the kind ones, had a limit where love stopped and rules began. The truth was more complicated. Rosa had tried, but pain does not always keep accurate records. Sometimes it edits memory until the wound makes sense. And in Evan's memory, the woman who once opened the door became a figure behind glass, watching as he was taken somewhere he did not choose. The first foster home Evan entered smelled like lemon cleaner and boiled vegetables. It was not a bad house. That was what made it difficult to hate. The sheets were clean. The refrigerator had milk with an expiration date that had not passed. The woman who took him in, Mrs. Hanley, spoke in careful sentences, the way people speak around a dog they think might bite. She showed him the bathroom, the kitchen, the small bedroom he would share with another boy, and a drawer where he could put his things. His things fit in half of it: 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a toothbrush still in its plastic wrapper, a county-issued duffel bag with his name written on masking tape. Mrs. Hanley told him he was safe there. Evan nodded because he had learned that adults liked nodding. It made them feel their words had landed somewhere useful. But safe did not feel like clean sheets. Safe did not feel like a drawer. Safe did not feel like a woman checking a clipboard in the hallway while pretending not to count how many towels he used. Safe, to Evan, had smelled like lint and burnt coffee. It had sounded like dryers turning after midnight. It had looked like Rosa Alvarez pretending not to watch him from behind the counter. The second foster home was louder. The third had too many children and not enough cereal. The fourth was quiet in a way that made every mistake echo. By the time Evan was 13, he had learned that home could be a word adults used for places that kept receipts. He had slept under superhero blankets, army blankets, flowered quilts, and once on a couch because the bed promised to him had not been delivered. Every place had rules. Every place had a refrigerator he was not supposed to open without asking. Every place had a version of kindness that came with a time limit. The labels came next: guarded, difficult, manipulative, street smart. That last one followed him from school offices to case notes to whispered conversations between adults who thought a closed door meant a child could not hear. Street smart sounded almost like praise if a person did not understand it, but Evan understood. It meant they thought he knew too much in the wrong direction. It meant he made adults nervous because he had learned their weaknesses before they had learned his, so he adjusted. With teachers, he became quiet enough to be pitied. With other foster kids, he became sharp enough not to be touched. With social workers, he became polite. Not warm, never warm. Warmth invited questions, but polite made adults write phrases like improving and cooperative. He discovered that the truth did not matter as much as timing. If he told a teacher he had not slept, she gave him extra time on homework. If he said nothing when another boy took food from the pantry, the house stayed peaceful. If he let his eyes water at the right moment, adults softened. If he went blank, they got tired and moved on. At first, these were survival skills. A child with no control uses whatever control he can find. But survival skills are dangerous when nobody teaches you when to put them down. The closest anyone came was Marlene Price. She was a counselor at a county youth center, with silver hair, tired eyes, and a desk covered in folders no one could keep up with. She did not ask Evan how he felt on the first day. He liked her for that. Instead, she gave him a notebook and told him he could write down anything he was tired of saying out loud. Evan wrote nothing for 2 weeks. Marlene never scolded him. On the 3rd week, he wrote one sentence. "I do not know where my blue coat went." Marlene read it, then looked up slowly. "Who gave you the coat?" Evan shrugged, but something in his face must have answered before his mouth could stop it. After that, Rosa's name entered the room. Not all at once. Evan did not hand Marlene the story like a confession. He gave it in pieces. A laundromat, a woman with quarters in her pocket, soup from a vending machine, a chair near a dryer, a hand pressed to glass as the county car pulled away. Marlene listened without making the listening feel expensive. One afternoon, she slid a blank envelope across the desk. "You could write to her," she said. Evan stared at the envelope like it might burn him. "What would I say?" "The truth," Marlene said. "Start there. The truth." The word felt too clean for what lived inside him. That night, in a foster bedroom that smelled like dust and another boy's sneakers, Evan tried. He sat on the floor with the notebook against his knees and wrote Rosa's name at the top of the page. "Dear Mrs. Alvarez." He hated how small it made him feel. He wrote that he remembered the soup, then crossed it out. He wrote that he was not mad, then crossed that out too, because it was a lie, and because it was not enough bad. He wrote that maybe she should have fought harder, then stared at the sentence until shame rose hot in his throat. By morning, the page was gone. He had torn it into pieces so small they looked like lint. At school that day, a boy named Travis saw Evan watching the mail cart outside the office and laughed. "What, you waiting for your real family to remember you?" Evan did not hit him. He wanted to. Instead, he smiled. It was the first time he understood that a smile could be used like a locked door. "My real family's dead," Evan said. It was not true. Not fully. But the lie did what he needed it to do. Travis stopped laughing. A teacher overheard just enough to pull Evan aside gently. By the end of the day, Evan had been given space, sympathy, and no punishment for missing class. He should have felt guilty. He did. A little. But guilt was quieter than relief. That was how the lesson rooted itself in him. Pain did not need to be false to be useful, but it could be shaped. It could be trimmed, sharpened, rearranged. A person did not have to tell the whole truth to be believed. He only had to tell the part that made others lower their voices. Marlene saw the change before anyone else. "You're learning how to disappear in front of people," she told him once. Evan laughed. "You get paid to say stuff like that?" "No," she said. "I get paid to notice when a child thinks being understood is the same as being trapped." For a moment, Evan almost hated her, because she was close. Too close. The final break came over $23 missing from a foster mother's purse. Evan had not taken it. That was the cruel joke of it. By then, he had lied about plenty. He had stolen small food items, skipped school, invented relatives, invented grief, invented apologies. But he had not taken that money. No one believed him. The foster father did not yell. He only looked disappointed, which was worse because disappointment sounded like a verdict already written. The social worker said Evan had to understand his history made trust difficult. Mrs. Hanley, from the first house, was mentioned as if she were evidence in a case Evan had not known was still open. Marlene tried to slow things down. Evan did not let her. He packed before anyone told him to. Not everything, just what fit in the county duffel. The notebook stayed behind. So did the blank envelope with Rosa's name never written on it. That night, he slipped out a side door and walked until the houses thinned into gas stations and empty lots. At a bus station near the highway, Evan curled on a bench under a broken heater and made himself a promise. He would not beg Rosa to remember him. He would not ask Marlene to explain him. He would not keep trying to be the kind of boy adults could save on paper. If the world only believed stories, then he would learn to tell better ones. And if no place was going to keep him, then one day he would become the person who decided who got to stay. Rosa Alvarez found Evan again in the winter. He turned 17. Not because the county helped her. The county had lost track of him twice. She found him because a woman from the youth center remembered the boy who wrote about a blue coat and called the laundromat on a Tuesday afternoon. By then, Evan was sleeping wherever the night allowed him to disappear. Bus stations, friends' floors, a storage room behind a closed tire shop when the man who owned it forgot to lock the side door. When Rosa saw him, she did not cry. That would have been easier for Evan to reject. She stood near the curb outside a gas station, smaller than he remembered but still carrying herself like a woman who could make grown men step aside. Her hair had gone almost fully gray. Her hands looked more swollen around the knuckles. But her eyes were the same. They looked at him without flinching. "You got tall," she said. Evan laughed once, dry and defensive. "That why you came?" "No," Rosa said. "I came because somebody should have." He hated how fast that reached him. For a few seconds, he was 11 again, watching her through glass. Then the feeling passed, and pride came back to protect him. "I'm fine." Rosa looked at his shoes. One sole had started to peel away at the front. "Sure," she said. "You look like a man with a retirement plan." He almost smiled. That was how she got him. Not with pleading. Not with big speeches about second chances. Rosa never made rescue sound holy. She made it sound like work. Alvarez Wash and Fold looked older than Evan remembered. 2 dryers were out of order. The sign outside buzzed with a weak blue light. The wall near the restroom had been patched badly after a leak. But when Evan stepped inside, the smell hit him so hard he had to stop walking. Bleach, wet cotton, burnt dust, coffee that had sat too long on the warmer. For one dangerous moment, he wanted to put his head down on the folding table and sleep. Rosa did not mention that. She handed him a rag. "Tables first," she said. That became the shape of his return. No adoption papers, no speeches, no bedroom with his name on it. Just a schedule written on a yellow pad, an hourly wage, a locker in the back, and a key he was not allowed to lose. The key mattered. Evan pretended it did not. He put it on the ring with the cheap bottle opener he carried and acted like it was nothing. But the first morning he opened the laundromat before Rosa arrived, something inside him shifted. He stood in the doorway while the lights clicked awake, row by row. The machine sat silent. The chairs were upside down on the tables. The world, for once, waited for him to begin it. He told himself this was what normal people felt. A place to unlock. A reason to arrive on time. A woman who noticed if he did not. For the first few weeks, Evan was almost good. He cleaned lint traps carefully. He learned which machines shook too hard on the spin cycle. He carried baskets for Mrs. Wynne, who came every Thursday with pillowcases full of towels. He fixed the coin slot on washer 6 after watching a repairman do it once. Rosa watched him from behind the counter, not smiling much, but not looking away either. That should have been enough. But shame does not disappear just because life improves. It waits for quiet moments. Evan had not told Rosa about the money he owed. It was not a large amount, but it belonged to boys who had slept in the same abandoned places he had and learned worse habits there. He had borrowed it for food, then for a jacket, then to pay back someone else. Debt, in his world, moved like sickness. It never stayed with the person who caught it first. One of the boys, Trey Maddox, came into the laundromat near closing on a rainy night. He was 18, thin, smiling, and mean in the lazy way of people who knew exactly where your weak spot was. "Look at you," Trey said, leaning against a dryer. "Got yourself a grandma and a cash register." Evan kept folding towels. "She's my boss. She know that?" Evan looked up. Trey's smile widened. "She know what you were doing before you got all clean in here?" The words did what they were meant to do. They dragged the old Evan into the bright laundromat and stood him in front of Rosa's counter. Evan gave Trey $10 from his own pocket that night. Then 20 the next week. But debt did not shrink when fear fed it. Trey came back again, asking louder, standing closer to customers, making jokes about how some kids got lucky if they found the right old lady to feel sorry for them. Evan began to feel trapped by the very place that had saved him. Every hour Rosa trusted him made the lie heavier. Every paycheck felt already spent. Every time she called him Mijo by accident, then corrected herself with a cough, something twisted in his chest. He could have told her. That was the truth he would later avoid. He could have said, "I owe money. I made mistakes. I need help before I make a bigger one." Rosa would have been angry. She might have made him pay it back slowly. She might have called Marlene. She might have sat him down and made him feel smaller than he could stand. But she would not have thrown him away. Evan did not believe that. Or maybe he did, and that was what frightened him most. The first time he took money from the drawer, it was $5. He did it after closing, while Rosa was in the back office checking inventory. The bill sat near the rolled quarters, soft from too many hands. Evan looked at it for a long time before touching it. His heart pounded so hard he thought the machines might hear. Then he took it. Not stealing, he told himself. Borrowing. $5 was nothing. $5 could be replaced before anyone counted. $5 was less than Rosa had spent on soup for him when he was 8. Less than the coat. Less than the hours she let him sit in the warmth. That thought should have stopped him. Instead, it opened a darker door. A part of Evan whispered that maybe this was not betrayal. Maybe this was balance. Rosa had given him things he never asked for, and every gift had made him feel poor. Taking something back, even something small, made the debt feel less one-sided. By the end of the month, 5 had become 15. 15 had become 30. He learned which days Rosa counted carefully and which days she trusted the register total because her knees hurt too much to stand longer. He hated himself after each time. Then he hated Rosa for making him hate himself. One night, she stood beside him while he mopped near the front windows. "You been sleeping?" she asked. "Yes." "You been eating?" "Yes." "You been telling me the truth?" The mop stopped. Evan did not look at her. Outside, rain moved down the glass in crooked lines. Inside, the dryers turned with their low, patient thunder. "I'm trying," he said. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. That is not the same thing. The words were not cruel. That was why they hurt. A few days later, Rosa found the first real shortage in the books. She did not accuse him. Not then. She called him to the counter after the last customer left and placed the ledger between them. Her finger rested beside the numbers that did not match. Her face looked tired, not angry, and Evan understood suddenly that disappointment could be worse than rage because rage still believed something could be fought. "Help me understand this," Rosa said. Evan stared at the ledger. There it was, the first door back, open, waiting. All he had to do was step through it with the truth. Instead, Evan lowered his eyes and began choosing which part of himself to hide first. Rosa did not call the police. That was the first thing Evan noticed, and somehow it made him feel worse. If she had shouted, he could have met anger with anger. If she had fired him, he could have told himself she had been waiting for a reason. But Rosa only closed the ledger, took the register drawer to the back office, and told Evan to follow. The office was barely larger than a closet. Evan stood near the door because sitting felt too much like surrender. Rosa lowered herself into the chair. "How much?" she asked. Evan stared at the floor. He told her $5. It was not the truth. It was only the smallest part of it. Rosa's face changed, not because she believed him, but because she understood he had chosen the lowest lie first. Try again. Shame rose so quickly he almost hated her for making him feel it. He wanted to tell her about Trey, about the debt, about the nights he still woke up afraid someone would take the little he had managed to keep. Instead, he gave her another piece. Maybe 30. Rosa folded her hands. Maybe is what people say when they want forgiveness before they give the truth. She did not fire him. She made a list. What was missing, what he would pay back, which shifts he would work, and what would happen if another dollar disappeared. Her rules were exact, almost cold, but beneath them was something Evan could not bear to name. She was still making room for him. For one moment, he was close to saying all of it. Trey's name, the debt, the fear. Then Rosa touched the ledger. This place survives on trust, she said. Not money. Money is just the part people can count. Evan heard something she had not said. You are the kind of boy who ruins what people build. He nodded. He apologized. He promised to pay it back, and he kept the rest hidden. That was the first door back. He did not slam it shut. He simply stepped around it and told himself he could still return later. Malik Reed started coming into the laundromat 2 weeks after that. He was 19, though hunger and weather made him look both younger and older depending on the light. He carried his clothes in a black trash bag tied carefully at the top. The first time he came in, he stood near the change machine and counted coins in his palm before accepting he did not have enough. Before Rosa could speak, Evan took 2 quarters from his own pocket and set them on top of the machine. Malik looked at him with suspicion first, then gratitude. Thanks, man. Evan shrugged. Wasn't much, but it was. Not because of the money, because of the way Malik looked at him afterward. Not like a rescued stray, not like a problem, like someone who had made it across a river and might know where the rocks were. That look fed something in Evan he did not understand yet. Malik began coming on Wednesday nights. He was sleeping behind a closed grocery store then, sometimes at the Mission when beds were open. Evan learned that Malik had aged out of a group home, lost a warehouse job after missing 2 shifts, and kept a photograph of his little sister folded inside his wallet. Evan should have heard a warning in the similarities. Instead, he heard admiration. You ever sleep out? Malik asked one night. Evan almost said no. The lie came easily. Then he saw Malik watching him with that open, desperate hope young men try to disguise as casual interest. Yeah, Evan said. For a while. Malik nodded like Evan had just handed him a map. After that, Evan became careful with him. Not kinder, exactly. Careful. He gave Malik small advice about shelters, church meals, bathrooms, and which adults asked fewer questions. It made Evan feel useful. Rosa watched the 2 of them from the counter. You like him looking up to you? She said after Malik left. Evan stiffened. I'm just helping. Then make sure helping is what you are doing. He hated how she could turn a simple sentence into a mirror. The piece broke because of Dana. Or rather, the memory of Dana hidden in Rosa's office. Evan found it while looking for receipt paper. A small envelope had slipped behind a box of tax records. His mother's name was written across the front in Rosa's careful block letters. Dana Cole. Inside were old notes. $20, $40, $75, rent, medicine. A line that said, for Evan's shoes do not tell him. At the bottom was one sentence in Dana's handwriting. I swear I'll pay you back when things get right. Evan stood with the paper trembling in his hand. Rosa found him there. She came to me sometimes, Rosa said. You gave her money? When I could, and you never told me. She was your mother. The answer was gentle. Evan heard it as control. All those years, he had carried his anger like a private inheritance. He had believed Dana left him with nothing but broken promises. Now Rosa was showing him another version. Dana begging. Dana ashamed. Dana trying and failing in ways Evan had not been allowed to see. It should have made his mother more human. Instead, it made Evan feel robbed. You let me hate her wrong, he said. Rosa's eyes narrowed with pain. No, I let you remember her without one more wound. But Evan was no longer listening. Rosa had known things about his life and chosen what he should carry. The woman who once seemed like shelter now looked like another adult standing between him and his own story. You always liked being the good one, he said. Rosa flinched. Evan saw it. He knew exactly how cruel the sentence had been. He wanted to take it back. He did not. That night, after closing, Evan paid Rosa $10 toward the missing money. He cleaned the tables. He locked the front entrance. He did everything a grateful young man was supposed to do. But something in him had shifted. The chance Rosa had given him no longer felt like mercy. It felt like proof that she believed she had the right to measure him. And once Evan told himself that, gratitude became easier to bury. In its place, resentment began to grow. For a while, Evan tried to behave like a man who had been forgiven. He arrived early. He wiped the machines without being told. He paid Rosa back in small folded bills, each one placed on the counter with a seriousness that looked almost like repentance. When customers came in, he was polite. When Mrs. Wynne dropped a basket, he picked up every towel before she had to bend. When Malik came on Wednesday nights, Evan still helped him find enough change for a washer. From the outside, it looked like repair. But repair requires truth, and Evan had only given Rosa the portion he could survive losing. The rest stayed inside him. Trey Maddox kept coming around. Not every night. That would have been easier to explain. He came unpredictably, which made the fear worse. Sometimes he waited outside by the payphone. Sometimes he came in and bought a soda he did not want. Sometimes he said nothing at all, just smiled at Evan across the rows of machines until Evan felt the old life pressing against the windows. "You think that old woman made you new?" Trey asked one evening. Evan kept his eyes on the dryer filter in his hands. "No." "Good," Trey said, "because new people don't owe old debts." The money started disappearing again. Not much at first. Enough for Evan to convince himself he was keeping things from getting worse. Enough to pay Trey down. Enough to buy one more week of quiet. He told himself Rosa would not really suffer from a few bills missing here and there. She owned the place. She had survived worse. She knew how hard life could be. That last thought was the ugliest because it sounded almost moral. He was using Rosa's compassion as evidence that she could afford to be betrayed. By then, Malik had become part of the laundromat's night rhythm. He came in with his black trash bag, washed what little he owned, and sat near the vending machine with his shoulders hunched like a person trying not to take up space. He asked Evan questions in a way that made Evan feel older than 17. Where could a person get day labor without an ID? Which church gave meals without a sermon first? How did you sleep without letting someone steal your shoes? Evan answered some of it honestly. That was what made the lie later so hard to forgive. One night, Malik came in soaked from rain, shivering so hard his fingers could barely hold the coins. Rosa saw him from the counter and handed him a towel without comment. Malik looked embarrassed, but Evan saw his face soften. "She always like that?" Malik asked. Evan glanced at Rosa. "Depends what she thinks you're worth saving from." Malik frowned. "What's that mean?" "Nothing." But it was not nothing. The resentment Evan carried toward Rosa had begun to leak into everything. Her kindness no longer landed cleanly. When she helped Malik, Evan felt replaced. When she corrected Evan, he felt judged. When she looked tired over the books, he felt accused even before she spoke. The shortage that broke everything was larger than the others. Rosa found it on a Friday morning after a week of slow business and overdue bills. Evan watched from the folding table as she went through the ledger twice, then a third time. Her lips moved silently with the numbers. One hand pressed against her lower back. She did not look at him first. She looked toward the change machine, then toward the corner where Malik usually sat. That was all it took. A small movement of the eyes. A tiny opening. Evan felt it and understood immediately what it could become. He could have closed it. He could have said, "No, Malik had nothing to do with this." He could have told the truth about Trey, about the cash, about every little lie stacked behind him like dirty laundry no one wanted to unfold. Instead, he said nothing. Rosa called him over. "Was Malik here last night?" Evan swallowed. "Yeah." "How long?" "I don't know." "A while." "Was he near the counter?" The answer was no. Evan knew it was no. Malik had stayed by the vending machine most of the night, reading an old newspaper someone left behind. He had helped an elderly man carry a basket to a cab. He had thanked Rosa twice for letting him dry his socks after closing. Evan saw all of that. Still, he let his face become uncertain. "He moved around some," Evan said. Rosa studied him. The laundromat seemed to go quieter, though the machines kept running. Evan. One word. His name, not as accusation yet, but as a warning. As if Rosa could hear him approaching a line and was asking him not to cross it, he crossed it softly. I'm not saying he did anything. That was the sentence that did the damage. Not a direct lie. Not something a person could hold up later and point to cleanly. Just a careful arrangement of words that let suspicion finish the work for him. Rosa closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, disappointment had replaced confusion. The next time Malik came in, Rosa did not hand him a towel. She asked him to step outside. Evan stayed behind the counter. Through the window, he watched Malik's face change as Rosa spoke. First confusion, then humiliation. Then a hurt so plain it made Evan look down. Malik did not shout. That might have saved Evan from seeing him clearly. He only came back inside long enough to collect his trash bag of clothes. His eyes found Evan. You know I didn't, Malik said. Evan's mouth went dry. Rosa was near enough to hear. This was the last clean second. Evan could still have stopped it. The truth would have cost him Rosa's trust, his job, maybe the only place that had ever taken him back. But it would have saved Malik from carrying a stain that did not belong to him. Evan looked at the floor. I don't know what you did, he said. Malik stared at him as if Evan had become someone else while standing in the same clothes. Then he left. The consequences did not arrive all at once. That was another mercy Evan misused. Malik stopped coming to the laundromat. Word moved through the neighborhood in the quiet, dirty way accusations move when no one wants to admit they are spreading them. A shelter volunteer heard he had been stealing. A part-time warehouse supervisor decided not to call him back. Someone mentioned an old trespassing charge, then another small offense, until Malik's whole life became evidence against him. Rosa never filed a police report over the missing money. She did not have to. Sometimes a person's name can be damaged without a courtroom ever touching it. Evan told himself Malik would be fine. Malik knew how to survive. Malik was used to people thinking the worst. Malik had nothing solid to lose anyway. Each excuse made Evan smaller. The worst moment came a week later. Evan found Malik behind the closed grocery store, sitting on an overturned crate with his bag beside him. He had a split in his coat sleeve and a paper cup of coffee gone cold between his shoes. I used to think you made it out, Malik said. Evan stood under the yellow security light and said nothing. Malik looked up. But you didn't. You just found somewhere warm to stand while somebody else stayed outside. There was no anger in his voice, only recognition. That hurt more. Evan wanted to apologize. He wanted to say Trey's name. He wanted to confess that none of this had started with Malik, and all of it had landed on him because Evan was a coward. But apology would require returning to the truth, and the truth now had interest on it. It had grown larger while he avoided it. So Evan said the safest cruel thing. You should leave town for a while. Malik gave a small laugh. Yeah, he said. That's what people always tell the ones they don't want to look at. Evan walked away before his face could betray him. That night, he returned to the laundromat and cleaned until after midnight. Rosa had gone home. The place smelled of detergent and old rain. Evan counted the register twice, wrote the numbers carefully, and placed everything where it belonged. For the first time in weeks, nothing was missing. But the room did not feel cleaner. It felt arranged around the absence of someone Evan had chosen to sacrifice. And somewhere inside him, a quieter knowledge settled in. He had not merely protected himself. He had learned that another person could be pushed into the cold, and the world would accept it if the story sounded believable enough. Evan did not leave Alvarez wash and fold in a storm. That would have made the story easier to tell. There was no broken window, no final screaming match, no police car outside the laundromat. He left the way many damaged people leave the last good place in their lives. Slowly, coldly, and with enough pride to pretend it had been his decision all along. Rosa never proved everything. She knew about the missing money. She knew Evan had not told her the whole truth. She knew Malik had been hurt in a way that could not be repaired by simply letting him back inside. But knowing and proving were different things, and Rosa had spent enough years running a small business to understand the cruelty of that difference. For a few months, Evan kept working. The warmth was gone. Rosa spoke to him about shifts, repairs, customer complaints, and nothing softer. Evan did what he was asked, paid back what he had admitted to taking, and acted as if obedience could replace honesty. It could not. One evening, after a customer accused Rosa of overcharging and Evan stepped in with the smooth, calm voice he had learned in foster home, Rosa watched him settle the argument without raising his tone. The customer left satisfied. Evan looked almost proud. Rosa did not praise him. "You are getting very good at sounding sincere," she said. That was the closest they came to a goodbye. 2 weeks later, Evan quit. He told people the laundromat had become too small for him. He said Rosa was old-fashioned. He said he wanted work that mattered. None of that was completely false, which made it useful. The first shelter job came through a man who knew someone from the youth center. Evan was 21, still lean, still watchful, with an ability to read desperation before it became words. The place was a converted church basement with a broken coffee machine, 30 beds, and a staff that changed too often to remember everyone's name. Evan remembered names. That made people trust him. He knew which men hated being touched on the shoulder. He knew which women would leave if asked too many questions too soon. He knew that a clean pair of socks could make a person cry if they had spent 3 days pretending their feet did not hurt. He knew shame had a smell, a posture, a way of making people apologize before asking for what they needed. At first, he used that knowledge well. He got a veteran to accept medical help after 3 staff members failed. He convinced a woman sleeping in her car with 2 children to come inside before the temperature dropped. He sat with a teenager aging out of care and did not ask him to be grateful. People began to say Evan had a gift. Evan began to believe them. That was where the danger changed shape. A gift can become a mask if a person wears it long enough. Evan moved from shelter work to outreach coordination, then to a small nonprofit that handled housing referrals, job placement appointments, bus passes, meal vouchers, and emergency motel stays. The work was messy, underfunded, and full of rules written by people who had never watched someone choose between buying soap and buying bread. Evan hated the rules. At least, that was what he told himself. He hated that one woman could be denied a bed because she missed an appointment while looking for her son. He hated that a man with no address needed mail to prove he existed. He hated that forms asked people to describe their suffering in small boxes that could never hold it. But beneath the anger, something else grew. Control. A waiting list could make people quiet. A referral could make them grateful. A signature could make them dependent. Evan discovered that authority did not always look like a badge or a courtroom. Sometimes it looked like a clipboard, a locked filing cabinet, a phone call returned or ignored. He remembered being a child discussed by adults with folders in their hands. Now he had the folders. He should have been careful with that. Instead, he felt safe. The program that made his name was called Open Path Outreach. The name was not his idea, but he liked it. It sounded generous without promising too much. At first, Open Path was small: a borrowed office, 2 volunteers, donated coats, a church partnership, a list of landlords willing to consider people with damaged records. Then came local attention. A newspaper profile called Evan, a former street kid helping others find their way back. Evan hated the phrase and loved what it did for him. Donations increased. Churches called. A city council member shook his hand in front of cameras. People who had once looked through boys like him now asked him to speak at breakfast events. He learned to tell his story in a way that made rooms go silent. Not all of it. Never all of it. He talked about cold nights, hunger, foster care, and the woman who once gave him soup in a laundromat. He did not talk about Malik. He did not talk about the missing money. He did not talk about how the first person he had ever truly pushed out was someone who looked too much like himself. Rosa saw the article. She folded it carefully and left it on her kitchen table for 3 days before throwing it away. That was how Claire Benton entered his life. Claire was 26, a volunteer accountant with tired eyes and a belief in clean records that Evan first found almost innocent. She wore cardigans, carried a metal water bottle, and had the habit of asking for documentation in a voice so polite people underestimated her. Evan liked her immediately because she admired him, not in a romantic way. That would have been easier to name. Claire admired the version of Evan the article had built, the survivor who had returned to the cold with blankets, the man who knew the system from both sides, the wounded person who had turned pain into service. "You understand them," she told him after her first week. Evan smiled. "I was them." The sentence worked every time. Claire helped organize the books. She created cleaner spreadsheets, tracked donations, corrected vendor payments, and warned Evan that growth required discipline. Evan thanked her. He meant it. In the beginning, he even tried to follow her systems. But OpenPath had become larger than its money. More people came than they could help. More donors wanted proof. More forms required numbers that made suffering easy to fund. Evan started making decisions in the gray spaces. A motel voucher held back for someone who would speak well of the program. A bus pass given only after a man agreed to attend a meeting Evan needed counted. A housing referral delayed for a woman who questioned why her name appeared on a form she did not remember signing. Evan told himself he was managing scarcity. Then he told himself he was protecting the program. Then he stopped needing the explanation every time. People still received help. That was the part he leaned on. A few beds were filled. Some meals were served. Some men got jobs. Some women found temporary rooms. Evan pointed to those lives whenever doubt came near him. But help had become conditional in his hands. It moved toward people who made him feel effective, grateful, powerful, necessary. It moved away from those who challenged him, embarrassed him, or reminded him of the boy he had once been. Claire noticed first. Not the whole shape of it. Not yet. Only edges. A name used twice. A voucher recorded but not delivered. A grant report that described outcomes more neatly than real life ever did. She came to Evan late one afternoon with a folder held against her chest. "These don't match," she said. Evan did not look worried. That was his first mistake. "What doesn't?" Claire opened the folder. Her finger moved across the page. Dates, signatures, disbursements. Maybe it's sloppy intake work. Maybe it's nothing. Her voice changed on the last sentence. She wanted it to be nothing. Evan could hear that. He could use that. He leaned back, tired but calm, the posture of a man carrying too much for others to understand. "Claire," he said gently, "you're looking at paperwork. I'm looking at people who might freeze if we wait for paperwork to be perfect." The line was unfair. He knew it as he said it. Claire's face tightened, not with anger, but with the pain of someone whose kindness had just been used against her caution. "I'm not asking for perfect," she said. "I'm asking for honest." For a second, Evan saw Rosa standing over a ledger years earlier, asking him to help her understand the numbers. The memory passed through him like a warning. Then pride covered it. "You want honest?" he said. "Honest is that people like us don't get funded unless people like you can put us in clean columns." Claire went quiet. Evan had found the place where guilt lived in her. He saw it land. He saw her question herself. He saw the folder lower slightly in her hands. And there it was again. The taste of power. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the small, terrible relief of making another person doubt what they knew. Claire left the folder on his desk. "I'll check again tomorrow," she said. After she was gone, Evan sat alone in the office and opened the file. He saw the problem clearly. He saw the people behind the names. He saw, for one brief and honest moment, how far he had moved from the boy who once needed someone to notice him. Then he closed the folder and locked it away, because by then, Evan Cole no longer feared being forgotten most. He feared being found out. Claire Benton did not come back the next morning with anger. She came back with copies. That frightened Evan more. Anger could be redirected. Accusation could be turned into misunderstanding. But paper had a patience people did not. It waited on desks. It kept dates. It held names exactly where someone had placed them. Claire closed the office door behind her and set a folder in front of him. "I checked again," she said. Evan looked at the folder as if it belonged to someone else. And it is not sloppy intake work." Her voice stayed quiet. That made the room feel smaller. Outside the office, volunteers were sorting donated coats into cardboard boxes. Someone laughed near the coffee table. A man in the hallway asked whether the motel vouchers had come in. Ordinary sounds. Useful sounds. The kind of sounds Evan had spent years using to prove that OpenPath mattered. Claire sat across from him. "There are people listed as receiving help who say they never got it. There are signatures that do not match. There are referrals counted twice. And there are funds tied to names that should not have been used that way." She stopped there. She did not explain how. She did not need to. The damage was already in the shape of the sentence. Evan leaned back slowly. You think I stole from them? I think people were used, Claire said. And I think you know more than the files show. For a moment, he hated her precision. Then he saw her hands. They were shaking. That should have softened him. Instead, it gave him a place to press. You have no idea what it is like out there, he said. You think clean records keep people alive? Claire's face tightened, but she did not retreat. No, but dirty records can bury them. The words landed harder than he expected. Evan looked away. For one clear second, he saw Malik standing under a security light years earlier, saying Evan had only found somewhere warm to stand while someone else stayed outside. He saw Rosa's office. He saw the first $5 bill. He saw every small excuse that had grown into a system large enough to hurt strangers. He was not confused. That was the terrible part. He understood. Claire slid another page across the desk. If you self-report, we can still separate what happened. We can protect some of the clients. Maybe not the program. Maybe not you. But them. Them. The word should have been simple. Instead, Evan heard a verdict. Protect them from you. His throat tightened. And what happens to me? Claire's answer came after a pause. I don't know. At least it was honest. That honesty almost saved him. Evan stood and walked to the window. Across the street, two men waited near the bus stop with donated bags at their feet. One of them wore shoes too thin for the weather. Evan had once been able to notice that without turning it into proof of his own importance. I tried to make it work, he said. Claire did not answer. I did help people. Yes, she said. You did. He turned back. That was worse than denial. If she had said he helped no one, he could have dismissed her. But Claire was giving him the hardest truth. The good he had done did not erase the people he had harmed. Before he could respond, the front room went quiet in a way Evan recognized. Rosa Alvarez had walked in. She was older now, smaller in the shoulders, but not fragile. Never fragile. She stood near the donation table with her purse held in both hands and looked around the room as if measuring the distance between what the place promised and what it had become. Evan came out of the office. Rosa. Claire turned at the name. For a second, the two women looked at each other, and Evan felt something tighten in him. Not fear exactly. Exposure. Rosa's eyes moved from Claire's folder to Evan's face. I read about this place, Rosa said. People came to the laundromat asking questions. What questions? The kind people ask when help starts costing them something they did not agree to pay. Evan forced a breath. You don't know what this is. No, Rosa said. But I know you when you start explaining before anyone accuses you. Claire looked down. Evan felt cornered by women who were not shouting, which made them harder to fight. Rosa asked to speak to him alone. Claire hesitated, then left the office folder on the desk and stepped into the hallway. Inside the office, Rosa did not sit. You in trouble? She asked. Evan gave a tired laugh. Depends who you ask. I am asking you. He looked at the floor. There were many answers available. Some even true. The system was underfunded. The paperwork was impossible. Donors wanted numbers. People needed help faster than rules allowed. Volunteers made mistakes. Clients lost documents. Everyone bent something sometimes. But Rosa had never been impressed by complicated excuses. I made choices, Evan said. The sentence came out before he could stop it. Rosa's face changed, not with surprise, but with grief. Then make another one. He looked at her. Tell the truth before someone with less power pays for it, she said. The room went still. There it was. The last clean offer. Not forgiveness, not rescue, not the soft return of childhood. Only the chance to stop multiplying harm. Evan wanted it. That was what he would remember later in prison and hate most. He had wanted, for several seconds, to be free of the performance. To hand Rosa and Claire the whole ugly shape of it. To let Open Path collapse if collapse was the first honest thing it had done in months. Then his phone buzzed. A message from the board chair. Audit team confirmed for Monday. Need all financial documentation ready. Claire responsible for reconciliation, correct? Evan stared at the screen. Claire responsable. The words arranged themselves into an escape before he admitted he was looking for one. Rosa watched his face. Evan. He put the phone face down. I need time. No, she said softly. You want time. He almost confessed then. Almost. Instead, he opened the office door and called Claire back in. His voice was steady by the time she entered. "We need to prepare a statement," he said. "Some of the reconciliation work may have been mishandled, not intentionally, but we need to be clear about who handled what." Claire stared at him. For a moment, she did not understand. Then she did. Her face did not collapse. It closed. "Evan," she said, barely above a whisper. He did not look at Rosa. If he had, he might have stopped. So he kept his eyes on the folder and continued building the lie carefully enough to sound responsible. By the end of that hour, Claire's name had not been accused directly. It had only been placed where suspicion could find it. Evan told himself he was buying time. He told himself he would fix it later. He told himself Claire was educated, stable, respected, the kind of person who could survive questions better than the people outside could survive losing the program. But underneath every excuse was the truth. He had been offered a chance to become human again, and he had handed the cost to someone who trusted him. The audit began on a Monday morning with 3 people in gray coats and a box of blank notebooks. They did not look cruel. That bothered Evan. Cruel people were easier to hate. These people were polite, tired, professional. They asked for files. They asked for dates. They asked who had handled reconciliation, who had approved disbursements, who had access to client intake records. Every question was calm enough to sound harmless and sharp enough to cut. Claire answered what she could. Evan watched her from across the conference table. She looked smaller than she had the week before, not weaker, but alone in a way he recognized and chose not to rescue. When one auditor asked about duplicate referrals, Evan did not accuse her. He only said Claire had been overseeing the cleanup process. When another asked why several client signatures appeared on forms Claire had logged, Evan said the office had grown faster than its safeguards. Nothing direct. That was Evan's specialty now. He had learned that a person did not need to throw a stone if he could make everyone look toward the window already cracked. By noon, Malik Reed was standing in the hallway. Evan saw him before Malik saw Evan. Older now, thinner in the face, a scar near one eyebrow. His coat was better than the one he used to wear, but he still held his shoulders like a man expecting to be told he was in the wrong place. Claire had found him. That much was clear. Malik did not shout when he entered the room. He did not perform pain for the auditors. He simply told them that years earlier, at Rosa's Laundromat, Evan had let suspicion fall on him because it was useful. He said that was how Evan worked, not by forcing people at first, but by moving shame from one body to another until the weaker person carried it. Evan's face stayed still. Inside, something old recoiled. "You have a record," Evan said. The room changed. Malik looked at him for a long moment. "So did you," he said. "You just found people willing to call yours a story." No one spoke. That should have been the moment Evan stopped. Instead, he felt the floor of his life tilt, and all he wanted was to make someone else fall first. By evening, Rosa was waiting for him outside the old laundromat. The sign was dark. A notice had been taped inside the glass. The business was not gone yet, but it had the silence of a place already being emptied in people's minds. Rosa stood with one hand on her cane. "You brought Malik into this," Evan said. "I answered when Claire called. You don't know what they're trying to do. I know what you are trying to do." He laughed once, without humor. "You always think you know me." Rosa looked at him then, fully, with no softness added to make the truth easier. "No," she said. "For years I kept seeing the boy. That was my mistake." Evan's jaw tightened. "You don't get to say that." "I do," Rosa said. "Because you are not that boy anymore." The word struck harder than an accusation. Rosa stepped closer. "You are not the child left waiting for someone to come back. You are not the child nobody signed papers for. You are not the child sleeping where he could be seen." Evan could not move. "You are the man who knows what it feels like to be outside," she said, "and still chooses who gets pushed there." He looked away first. That was the point of no return. Not because Rosa condemned him, because she had finally separated his wound from his choices, and Evan could not survive that separation. If he was no longer the abandoned child in her eyes, then he had to stand alone with what he had done. He would rather destroy the witness than face the verdict. The next morning, Evan gave a statement to the board. He did not name Claire as a criminal. He only framed her as overwhelmed, careless, emotionally attached to clients, too inexperienced for the scale of the work. He did not call Malik a liar. He only mentioned prior charges, unstable housing, resentment, possible motives. He did not call Rosa bitter. He only described an elderly former employer with old grievances and a failing business. Every sentence wore a clean shirt. Every sentence carried a blade. By the end of the week, Claire was suspended. Malik was questioned again about things that had nothing to do with the audit. Rosa's Laundromat lost 2 community contracts tied to Open Path's referrals. And Evan finally understood something. He had not saved the program. He had not saved himself. He had only made sure that when the structure fell, it would land on people who had once believed there was still something in him worth reaching for. That night, alone in his office, Evan sat with the lights off while messages filled his phone. He did not open them. For the first time, there was no version of the story that made him innocent. Only versions that delayed the truth. And delay was all he had left. By the time Evan Cole returned to federal court for sentencing, the story he had built around himself was gone. There were no cameras inside the room that mattered. No donors. No breakfast speeches. No framed newspaper article calling him a survivor who came back to help others. Only names. The prosecutor read them slowly. A woman who lost her motel placement after her paperwork was used twice. A veteran whose housing referral disappeared while Open Path reported him as served. 3 men whose signatures appeared on forms they could not read clearly enough to challenge. Volunteers who had spent months wondering whether their kindness had helped cover harm. Then came Claire Benton. She stood with a folded statement in both hands. Her voice shook once at the beginning, then steadied. "I trusted him because I thought pain had made him careful," she said. "I was wrong. Pain made him convincing. Careful would have meant telling the truth before other people had to pay for it." Evan looked down. Malik Reed spoke next. He did not ask the judge for cruelty. He did not ask for mercy either. "I used to think he got out," Malik said. "That mattered to me. I thought if Evan could be more than where he slept, maybe I could too. But he did not get out. He just learned how to stand on the inside and point at people still outside." The courtroom stayed quiet after that. Rosa Alvarez was the last to speak. She walked slowly to the front with one hand on her cane. Evan raised his eyes then, because some part of him still wanted the woman from the laundromat to find the child inside the man. Rosa did not give him that. "I opened a door for a boy once," she said. "I do not regret that. A hungry child should be fed. A cold child should be seen. But that child grew up, and when he had chances to tell the truth, he chose himself. When he had power over people who needed help, he made them earn his mercy." She paused. His childhood explains some of the wound. It does not explain away what he did with it. The judge sentenced Evan to 17 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release and restitution he would likely never fully pay. The sentence did not restore Rosa's laundromat. It did not return Claire's good name to the shape it had before suspicion touched it. It did not give Malik back the years spent carrying accusations that belonged to someone stronger, but it named the line Evan had crossed. The judge said Evan's past had been marked by abandonment, instability, and institutional failure. Then she said those facts did not cancel the adult choices that followed. Evan had known what it meant to be powerless. That knowledge should have made him more careful with the powerless, not more willing to use them. When it was over, Evan turned once toward Rosa. She was already walking away. Not because she hated him, because mercy, once used as cover for harm, had to learn where to stop. Months later, Alvarez Wash and Fold stood empty between the check-cashing place and the closed appliance store. The sign was dark. The chairs were stacked inside. A stray cat still crossed the back step some evenings, waiting near a building that no longer held warmth. People in Dayton remembered different versions of Evan Cole. The boy behind the laundromat. The young man Rosa tried to save. The director of Open Path Outreach. The defendant in federal court. All of them were true. But the final truth was the one he could not escape. Evan had once needed someone to open a way back for him. Later, when others stood where he had stood, he had the chance to do the same. He chose to decide who stayed outside